Will be the board of directors for Uber Technologies, and we are MBI Consulting, and we're here to advise your board. So, good morning, board of directors. We are MBI Consulting, and we are excited to be here today. My name is Gabriel Melgar, research consultant.
I'm Lisbeth Medina, the legal consultant.
My name is Ian Nathan, financial consultant.
And my name is Anu Ramal, the ethical consultant.
And on behalf of our entire team, thank you for having us here today. We come before you today to show you one question. Did Uber fail to accept its corporate social responsibility toward its stakeholders by focusing first on survival and profit rather than promoting ethical management practices and safeguarding user information? So, our team has worked hard to create suggestions and ideas to address this issue. But first, we had to start by looking at your corporate structure. Of course, we have Uber Technologies heading the top. And underneath, we have subsidiaries Razor, which takes care of ride-hailing income and issues, and Uber Eats. Underneath, we have recently acquired companies such as Otto and Jakarta that focus on new technologies that shows how your company is expanding and growing. Your company owns nearly 75% of the market share, and it continues to grow internationally as it's expanded into almost every continent. However, despite this market dominance, its market share in the United States has significantly decreased due to competitors like Lyft coming into the market. Your company was an innovative disruptor to the $100 billion global taxi industry. However, now there are many competitors that have entered the market, and your company competes with these competitors such as Lyft and against Amazon Flex and Grubhub when it comes to package and food delivery. So, this market share can not only be blamed on competitors, but it can be traced back to a data breach that occurred in October 2016. This data breach affected 57 million people, 50 million of them being users, and over 7 million of them being drivers. And personal information such as names, email addresses, and cell phone numbers were taken. So, what actually happened? This information was taken, and the breach was not immediately disclosed. And a $100,000 ransom was paid to the hackers in order to try to keep this breach a secret. If we take a look at a quick timeline of the events, we can trace this hack back to 2016. And in 2017, we see that you made some changes. You fired your CEO and hired a new one. However, our team believes that this is not enough in order to actually address this issue. And with the planned IPO in 2019, we believe that our solutions will help prepare your company for the future. If we take a look at who was actually affected, we have the customers, employees, and investors. Your customers and employees now have their information in the hands of the hackers, and they experience a loss of trust with their personal information. Your investors may now question to allocate funds into your company with its planned IPO coming up. Our solution faces has a triple bottom line of legality, financial applicability, and ethical obtainability. And our solution, we separated them into both the short term and the long term. Firstly, with the short term. The short term is all solutions that are obtainable within 1 year. We suggest that you send out apology letters to your customers, that you offer some sort of compensation and loyalty incentives, and that you implement ethics training and performance reviews for your executive management and new CEO. In the long term, we have some more obtainable solutions that will be more of a time investment. However, we believe that these solutions will help your company in the long run. These solutions are ones such as enhancing transparency to comply with third-party laws and regulations to stay ahead of the regulatory curve, and restructuring your corporate culture and establishing a code of ethics. So why are these solutions important? Because firstly, it retains your customer loyalty. It makes sure that your customers stay with your company rather than switching over to a competitor. It retains your market dominance and makes sure that you stay at the top of your market. It improves your company image, which is critical before your planned IPO in 2019. So, our team of consultants has worked very hard to come up with solutions to this issue. And I would now like to pass it on to our legal consultant, Ms. Medina, to go over not only the issue, but also the solution. Ms. Medina.
Thank you, Mr. Melgar. Just to start off with a brief timeline, in 2014, your company had a hack which affected 50,000 users. In 2016, then you also paid for a lawsuit about $20,000 settlement for that initial hack for not notifying your consumers in a timely manner. Later that year, you also discovered the most recent hack and paid the $100,000 ransom. Since it first was announced in 2017, you have had class action lawsuits and lawsuits from cities and states regarding that issue. So one of the major laws that was violated under this issue was Section 5 of the Federal Trade Commission Act, which states that an act is deceptive when it misleads its consumers. Your consumers did not know that your company was hacked, which was misleading them by making them think that their information was safeguarded. In addition, 48 states have data breach notification laws, so your company could be breaking many state laws at different measures. The company also violated some of the European Union General Data Protection Regulations that regard securing data and data breach notification. Since the announcement in 2017, your company has faced lawsuits from cities and states, and also 3 class action lawsuits. The first one we would like to discuss is the City of Chicago and the people of Illinois versus Uber Technologies. They are suing because they feel that your company did not notify their users in a timely manner, which means that that broke the Illinois Deceptive Business Practices Act. Before that, you could face a fine up to $50,000. In addition, they are also requesting $10,000 for each day that you did not notify your users, amounting to about $3.6 million. And then on top of that, $50 million to damages to individuals. The next lawsuit we would like to discuss is the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania versus Uber Technologies. They are requesting $1,000 per violation or user affected in Pennsylvania, again, because you failed to notify your users. We would like to note that this is an example of what could potentially happen with other states following lawsuits as well. The last one we would like to discuss is the people of the state of California versus Uber Technologies. What all these lawsuits have in common is that it's not about the security breach itself, but because your company failed to notify users in a timely manner. For that reason, our solution enhances transparency to prevent future lawsuits like this in the future. In addition to those lawsuits, your company is also facing class action lawsuits from users that are affected. What makes these lawsuits different from the ones that we previously discussed is that these users are concerned that their data was not safeguarded adequately. For that reason, our solution not only enhances transparency, but ensures that your company is investing in better technology to safeguard information so that consumers can trust your company. Your company is not in its first to be hacked in the market. The first hack, a hack that happened in previous years was LinkedIn in 2012. They settled this by paying a $1.25 million settlement for $50 compensation to 25,000 premium users. A more recent hack was the Yahoo hack in 2016. This hack, similar to your company, they failed to notify their users that 1 billion accounts were hacked, which led to 43 class action lawsuits and 5 stockholder class action lawsuits. And this also affected their negotiation with Verizon later. This is an extreme example. We would like to note this what could potentially happen to your company if you do not take action now. So how are these lawsuits affecting your company? First, your consumers will lose trust in your company, which could lead them to go switch your competitors such as Lyft, which will decrease your market share. In addition, it could also affect your planned IPO next year because exchanges could do some research on your legal activity before deciding to put your stock on the market. So our solution not only enhances transparency so consumers can regain your trust in their company, but also ensures that your company is staying ahead of the regulatory curve and also investing in better technology to prevent lawsuits in the future. I'll now pass it off to Mr. Nathan for the financial dimension.
Thank you, Ms. Medina. Your company was the first of its kind. It created the mobile rideshare industry, which is why it was so highly valued by venture capital at its founding. Although your company has grown its revenues year over year, your losses have now exceeded the billions of dollars annually. When the hack first occurred, you paid out hackers $100,000 to keep the breach a secret. And as your company plans to go public in 2019, it is imperative that you fix this issue now because a tarnished reputation will negatively affect the price of your stock. Now let's discuss the similar data breaches to see what costs your company could potentially be facing. Equifax had a hack of around 150 million users where they faced costs of over $200 million. Similarly, Yahoo had a data breach in 2016 of over 1 billion users and they faced costs of $466 million. Your company can only be profitable if it continues to grow and retain market dominance, and the data breach and its resulting implications on customer trust threatens this. According to many financial analysts, the valuation of your company has dropped by more than 20% since 2016. After years of massive growth, your company has seen a large decline in the past year, with the current valuation being $68 billion. As you can see from this chart, your company's market share went from around 90% to 75% in just 8 short months. Your company has continued to lose market share to its main competitor, Lyft. And as you can see from right here, you had the largest drop in market share after another controversy that sparked the Delete Uber campaign. A lack of action for this hack will only lead to a worse brand image, lowering your company's market share. The rideshare industry has extremely thin, if any, profit margins, and aggressive pricing does not generate enough income to cover fixed costs and driver compensation. Your revenues are directly proportional to the number of rides that you can facilitate. And as your company's growth has slowed down, expenses have climbed, revenues have shrank, and negative profit margins have widened. There were 57 million people affected by the hack, 7 million of them being drivers, and the other 50 million being the consumers. When customers find out about the hack, they will be unhappy with your company, and they could stop being customers of your brand, or worse, they could switch to your competitor, Lyft. To keep customers and drivers happy, you should compensate them where drivers could receive a higher portion of their fare earnings, and riders could receive a discount on future rides. We are recommending that you increase driver commission by 10% for the next 5 trips, and riders will receive a 10% off for the next 5 rides. Just to clarify, you are not paying out any money, rather you are giving out a discount, so you are taking in less revenues in the short term to maximize revenues in the long term. The estimated cost of driver loyalty will be $35 million, and the estimated cost of customer loyalty is $250 million, for a total cost of $285 million, which is 3.8% of your 2017 revenue. Compensation may be costly for your company in the short term, but it will keep customers loyal to your company, and they won't change to Lyft. And it is stated in the cultural norms that you are customer obsessed. You make short-term sacrifices for a lifetime of loyalty, and it will be beneficial in the long term because of the lifetime value of a customer. Because of the data breach, it will result in a decline in customer and investor trust, market dominance, and company growth. By implementing these compensations, you can retain customer and consumer loyalty, while the discounts and fare cuts will reduce income in the short term. They're necessary to ensuring customer retention in the long run. As you can see, our financial dimension fits in perfectly with our multi-tiered solution, so while it is minimizing revenues in the short term, it's maximizing revenues in the long term. I will now pass it on to our ethical consultant.
Thank you, Mr. Nathan. I would like to begin addressing the ethical problems that concern your company. First, Uber not only refused to safeguard its users' information as its top priority, but failed to act sufficiently on known security threats. Like Ms. Medina mentioned earlier, there was a hack in 2014 where 50,000 account information were stolen, and your company did not take security measures to fix that problem right then. Secondly, your company placed millions of users' information at risk. This could be one of the potential reasons why your company's market share is declining alongside many other controversies that surrounds your company. Thirdly, you failed to notify stakeholders in a timely manner. Even though your hack was discovered in 2016, you waited until 2017 to notify your users. And lastly, your company did not have a code of ethics to follow through. As a biggest ride-hailing company, it's important to establish and publish a code of ethics so that you maintain checks and balances within your company in order to reduce conflict of interest within your employees. On a positive note, your new CEO released a set of cultural norms back in November where he outlined some of the company's practices, what they're going to change. That's a positive step towards regaining customers' trust and branding yourself as an improved company, but there is so much more to improve before the planned IPO. So now, why does this matter? Your company still has the biggest market share in the market. What our consulting firm has found that you have developed a tarnished reputation and loss of users. Your users have found that safeguarding their information is not your top priority. So there's been a slump of users for your company, which has decreased your market dominance as well as their overall revenues. And due to the decision made by the executive CEO and the chief security officer, many of your experienced security team members are unwilling to work for your company. And due to the delayed disclosure, your company is under investigation by the Federal Trade Commission and UK's International Commissioner's Office, and facing at least 6 class action lawsuits within the United States only. And like I mentioned earlier, Uber released its new cultural norms back in November. There are 8 of them, and I'm focusing on 3 of the most important ones to you today. We're customer obsessed, we do the right thing, and we value ideas over hierarchy. Like Mr. Khosraw, your CEO, mentioned in the blog that these sets of cultural norms were designed after employee submission and majority votes. We hope to see more employee inclusion, teamwork, and collaboration in the future. And by implementing our solution, Uber will be in compliance with laws and regulations and global moral standards, which will ultimately improve your image and address the needs of your stakeholders. It will also address ethical standards which are accepted globally and expand upon your existing culture norms. So in order to avoid any biases while designing our solutions, we follow the Global Business Standard or GBS Codex. The GBS Codex is a collection of widely accepted conduct guidelines for companies created by the Harvard Business School professors. It organizes a series of ethical standards and groups them into 8 distinct principles. The Codex goes beyond ethical implication. And by following the Codex, your company ensures that it obeys the laws and reduces potential problem in the legal and financial dimension in the future. So there are 8 distinct principles in the GBS Codex, and they're as follows. And due to time constraint, I'm going to focus on 4 of them to you today. I'm going to talk about the reliability principle, transparency principle, dignity principle, and the responsiveness principle. So the first principle that your company violated is the reliability principle. It says to honor commitments, be faithful to your word, and follow through on promises, agreements, and voluntary undertakings, whether it's embodied in legally enforceable contracts. Uber showed that it cannot safeguard and it cannot be safe and trustworthy of your users' information. Millions of your users provided you complimentary information in a hope that your company will safeguard it. Not only that, but you waited a whole 12 months to disclose it. And a lot could happen in 12 months, but your company failed to make your stakeholders aware of this hack. Even though it's not a legally binding contract, your customers should be in peace of mind knowing that the biggest ride-hailing company will safeguard its users' information. And with this act, your company not only failed to comply with its own cultural norms on earning customers' trust and business. The next principle that your company violated is the transparency principle. It says to conduct business in a truthful and open manner, refrain from deceptive acts and practices, while making timely disclosures of material information and respecting obligation of confidentiality and privacy. Your company was not transparent to its user about the hack. Even though the first hack was discovered in 2014, where 50,000 account information were hacked, your company didn't notify the public or invest in security measures to prevent future hackings. And when the 2016 hack was discovered, you still didn't notify your users immediately, but rather focused on paying a ransom of $100,000 and signing a non-disclosure agreement. It's not only our consulting firm that found your company as non-transparent. Several federal governmental agencies such as the Federal Trade Commission and UK's ICO think that your company is non-transparent and have an ongoing investigation alongside the increasing number of lawsuits worldwide. The next principle that your company violated is the dignity principle. It says to respect the dignity of all people and enhance human development in the workplace. Your company failed to protect its customers' privacy and confidential information. Like I mentioned earlier, the first hack was discovered in 2014, and you failed to invest in better security measures to prevent future hackings. And when the 2016 hack was discovered, rather than focusing on restructuring your security measures, you tried to run away from the consequences by paying ransom and signing non-disclosure agreements. In addition, your drivers complained about not being able to locate right parties to know whether their information were affected or not. And the last principle that I'm going to talk about is the responsiveness principle. It says to be responsive to public needs while protecting public's interest. Like I mentioned earlier, Uber Technologies failed to provide adequate response to the breach. And again, there are several governmental agencies, such as the Federal Trade Commission, UK's International Commissioner's Office, who have an ongoing investigation into your company. So how does following this global business standard or GPS Codex principles help your company? In terms of the reliability principle, your company will be faithful towards its legal and voluntary obligation and will be better able to uphold its ethical or cultural norms. And in terms of transparency principle, your company will be able to disclose information in a timely manner, especially on issues regarding to privacy of its users. In terms of the dignity principle, your company will be better. Your company will invest in better security systems to protect its customers' information, which will show that your company values your customers' privacy and confidentiality. And in terms of responsiveness principle, your company will provide better responses to security threats and also engage in better communication within your company. So by implementing our solutions and following the Global Business Standard or GBS Codex principles, your company will be ethical both in the short and long term. So as a whole, business goes beyond making a profit. At this day and age, your customers are more socially aware and they want to associate themselves with a company that have core values and stand up for something. And by addressing this ethical issue and implementing our solution, Uber will comply with its own cultural norms, ethical standards, and globally accepted principles and present itself as a responsible company that is meant to be. Now I would like to pass on to Mr. Melgar to conclude our presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Ramal. I'd like to quickly summarize what our team of consultants have gone over. Just like any business decision, we realize that your company faces a time and money investment into implementing our solutions. So we made a list of pros and cons. Firstly, your company reputation and public perception will improve. Also, your preventative measures for the future in order to address a hack like this in the future will also improve. Not only will your drivers face an improved quality of work, but so will your customers. And you have a guarantee of a code of ethics you can lean on. Of course, there's a con side of this as well. And we realize that the short-term cost of implementation and the extensive time investment is a con side of this. However, as your cultural norms state, you are customer obsessed, and you're willing to make this short-term sacrifice in order to help your company in the long run. So we go back to the question we started with. Did Uber fail to accept its corporate social responsibility towards its stakeholders by focusing first on survival instead of enforcing ethical management practices and safeguarding their user information? Our solutions meet all three facets of this issue: the legal, financial, and ethical. And they meet a triple bottom line approach of people, planet, and profit. But let's actually look at how these solutions work. From an ethical standpoint, incorporating ethics training and performance reviews will boost your employee morale and find weaknesses within your own company. Establishing a code of ethics will restructure your corporate culture and prepare you for your planned IPO in 2019. From a financial dimension, apology letters will show that your company values its customers and cares about them. And compensation gives affected users a reason to stay with your company rather than switch over to a competitor such as Lyft. From a legal dimension, enhancing transparency and complying with third-party laws allows your company to stay ahead of the regulatory curve and be prepared for the future. And it also allows you to be more prepared for your planned IPO next year. So, why are these important? Because they retain your customer loyalty, they retain your market dominance, they improve your company's image, and prepare you for an IPO in 2019. So, Board of Directors at Uber Technologies, we hope you consider our solutions in order to build a company that every Uber employee, partner, and customer can be proud of. Thank you.
Okay. I have a couple of questions. So first of all, the implicit relationship with Uber drivers. Are drivers employees? Are they partners, or are they customers?
They are employees.
Okay. And is, in the context of that relationship, is there a commitment of senses in terms of how we've impacted drivers, or is it just the folks who use Uber and are your customers?
I'm sorry, could you?
Sure. So is the potential impact and the audience for whom you're seeking to influence by virtue of the recommendations you've made, do they include drivers, or do they include just customers?
Yeah, so they also include drivers. Our compensation includes drivers, giving them an extra 10% of the next 5 rides that they make.
So they're a stakeholder that you're seeking to influence or want to recommend are part of this.
Yes, we consider them as employees. So they are a stakeholder that have been affected by this hack, as 7 million of them were affected. And so we're looking for a way to compensate them, which is what our solutions are stating.
Okay. How do you implement ethics training? And how does that in turn, if I'm an Uber driver, why is it something I want to participate in or feel compelled to do so?
Thank you for your question. Ethics training maintains the overall performance of your drivers, and for example, Subway has this online exam that can pass through to get license things. So we can do something like that that's online, so that drivers have to pass that exam to be certified to be an Uber driver.
In addition to that, Uber does not have an established code of ethics. And being that they plan for their IPO next year, we believe that it is critical that they set a code of ethics that they can lean on as a public company.
Okay. What you recommended, is this going to be applicable just to the country where this data breach occurred here in the U.S., or is it applicable to Uber's activities across all countries in which you operate?
Thank you for your question, so it will be applicable to others. We want to make sure that when we're enhancing transparency, we're not only complying with U.S. laws. Uber does operate in other countries, so we must make sure that it's going to comply with the European Union's law regulations on securing data, like the data breach notification. So we are going to comply with all the international regulations as well. And international drivers will still have the same benefits as U.S. drivers, or U.S. customers will still have the same benefits as international customers as well.
Excellent. Okay, does Lyft have any type of program, or does Lyft have this sort of solution in place already, or is this something that would distinguish or differentiate Uber from Lyft?
Well, being that Uber is the dominant in the market, we believe that they should set themselves apart from their competitors.
So it's a very unique business model, Uber, because their employees are total strangers. They're not coming into the office every day. They don't have meetings. If whoever decides to use their spare time in the afternoon to use their car to be an Uber driver, right? So beyond a code of conduct and beyond training, what else are you considering, or are you even considering anything beyond that to really structure an ethics program to be a bit more encompassing and outreaching and accountable?
So that's a great question. We believe, for example, your executive management, they didn't have a code of ethics to lean on, as I mentioned in the previous answer. With nothing to lean on, there's nothing that your drivers, which are, they're, as you said, complete strangers, they have nothing that they can rely on as well. So we believe that it starts from the top, and if your executive management is complying with these ethics regulations, then so will your drivers.
So I should know the answer to this question because I'm on the board, but how large is my executive management? How many people are there? You know? That's okay. That's okay. I'm just trying to understand the business structure of the company. And as you know, we prepare for IPO in 2019, certainly you're going to have a lot more regulations to follow. One that comes to mind is Sarbanes-Oxley, which provides transparency. And you talk about transparency, internal controls, and all of that. What type of resources are you considering to really address the root cause of this hacking? Are you thinking of partnering with cyber solution companies? Are you thinking of partnering with other, maybe you only got one other similar business model, but have you thought about any other partnership that you could work with that has been through a hacking scenario, like Facebook? Facebook has just been in the news the past few weeks, right? So are you considering any of those best practices with your solution?
Can answer your questions. So in order to protect Uber from data hacking, Uber can hire bug bounties. So basically what they do is they're like very experienced hackers who can check your system if there's any security threats so that outside hackers cannot get into your system. So that could be one of your solutions in order to avoid future hackings in the future.
And I just would like clarification. So Kevin's question was on, did it also impact the drivers? Was their information compromised as well? And what is the percentage of those, the drivers, to the percentage of customers that their information was hacked?
Right. So out of the 57 million who were affected by this hack, who had information taken, 50 million of them were everyday users, which could have been anyone, and 7 million of them were Uber drivers.
I've got two questions. One is your proposal, you said, will cost about 4% of revenue.
Correct.
Who's paying for that?
So with the discount, you're not paying out this to your customers. With the discount, it's if you hadn't given that discount, you'll be making that 285 million. But since you're giving the discount, you're gonna not receive that revenue, so you're not paying out anything, but rather maximize it for the long term.
But our drivers, are the drivers subsidizing this, or is this coming out of our venture capital? I mean, we're not profitable, so the money's coming from somewhere. So who's paying for it again? I guess I'm still confused.
Sure. So, for example, if it were $10 fare, they'll receive 10% more. But those same drivers, if they weren't compensated because their data was hacked, they might choose to change to Lyft. So, although your company is paying for it in the short term, it is stated in your cultural norms that you're willing to make that short-term sacrifice for a lifetime of loyalty. When you implement that, drivers will stay with your company, and the lifetime value of that will pay itself over.
Will Uber, I think I understand that Uber takes 20% of each fare.
Correct.
So if a rider gets a 10% discount, does that mean that Uber takes 10% for those rides and the drivers are kept whole? Or is it that both the driver and Uber subsidizes the 10% discount?
So if it were a $10 ride, the rider would pay $9, but then the driver would receive $9 if they were both receiving that discount on that ride.
Okay. And I think we've got a firm philosophical commitment to the fact that we do not consider our drivers employees. And so I'm confused by your positioning of, in recommendation that we recognize Uber drivers as employees, because that has a series of ramifications both around our organizational and financial responsibilities to those that we consider subcontractors or independent contractors. We are a technology platform. We're not a ride or transportation company with employees in ways that you've indicated. So I'm confused about that, and I'm wondering if you're making a suggestion that we really fundamentally restructure our relationship and our understanding related to that. We've been sued on this quite significantly, but nonetheless, I believe our current position is that they are not employees. So would you speak to that question?
Yeah, so what we mean by that is we want to kind of build, like you said, build a better relationship with our drivers to also make sure that we keep their loyalty to our company instead of going to other companies. So our proposed solution with giving better treatment to our drivers is also going to be able to help other problems such as that has really occurred with their company as well.
So you're not suggesting that we convert these relationships into employment relationships with all of the obligations, corporate obligations to employees that are part of the employment relationship?
Not necessarily. We could create a better relationship to kind of treat them similar to employees, but just keep them as user as of now.
Also, following up on that, if they are independent contractors working or representing Uber, we want to make sure that the code of ethics is something that they comply with and something that they can lean on, just as your executive management leans on. And of course, they were stakeholders affected by this hack, as 7 million of them were affected.
Vital stakeholders, no doubt.
Yes, absolutely.
Not employees.
So I know that Uber has a rating system both for the driver and for the passenger. Have you considered having a rating system for Uber Corporation as far as protecting information and if there's been any compromise? And then the other question I'd like to kind of ask if it's been considered you talk about training of executive management. What about all employees? And how often? I think it's important that most likely the person that discovered the hack was a person much lower level than an executive manager. And whether or not they raised it in a timely fashion, that's also questionable. So what type of, when I mentioned program, that's what I'm talking about. You're creating an environment for the company where we have an environment for the company that employees can raise these concerns about any fear of retaliation, with that safety net, and that's something will be resolved as a reaction to them raising it.
sure that we're increasing transparency for the whole company. So that's why one of our solutions is that check and balances, for example, no one person has all the power. So by enhancing transparency and also putting that check and balances in place, not only one person is making the decisions, you'll have many people making decisions. And that's why we also incorporated performance reviews. So people in our executive management are also going to get reviewed. So it's not only just one person or a couple group of people having all the power.
I have one last question. So as our customers have had an Uber experience, they've used our service, in our driver partners' vehicles, what will be different in the future from their most recent experience prior to implementing the solution you've recommended?
With the compensation, they're going to realize that although the hack
Compensation to the drivers.
Sorry?
Compensation to drivers?
I'm sorry, compensation to the driver and the users, but
Okay.
in this case, the users. So when you give them that discount, it's going to show them that your company cares for them, and that although there was a mistake with the data breach, it shows that you are going to make that step to keep them as a customer. So when they get in that car the next time, they're going to know I'm with a company that truly cares for me.
We also would like to update the terms and conditions or the contract between Uber and its consumers to make sure that it's enhancing transparency. For example, the European Union's regulations which are coming in soon to enact, which would have to be, they would have to notify users within 72 hours. So we have to update our terms and conditions to make sure that if we ever got hacked again, our consumers would know before the 72 hours. So that's one of the steps we're also making sure that our users, so next time they get in a car, if their terms and conditions are updated, they know, okay, Uber is doing something different. So it might increase their loyalty as well.
And one other question, when's the last time you used an Uber?
3 weeks ago.
Last week.
I used one to get to the airport.
About a month ago.
Thank you for trusting us.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks.
Okay, a couple of things. You guys were awesome. You guys did a fantastic job, okay? Really, really strong. And let me explain why I say that. There were 2 or 3 times I'm thinking to myself, I wonder if they're going to do this. And then you went and did it, okay? So in context of, first of all, stressing the ethical element of it and the relationship piece that Uber has both with customers and with drivers, that's a big deal. I have teenagers, and in the parent journey, you learn a lot for your children. And among the things I've learned is that my children fundamentally see their world and their relationships with companies and corporations in a different way than I do or have had growing up. And I appreciate that this issue goes to really the core of that perception of how companies operate. It's an enormous, this issue that just happened with Starbucks in the last few days is a profound example of that. And I was impressed with how Starbucks responded, although it's going to take them a while to come out of it. And it also impressed upon me how public perception, particularly generational perceptions, are very different and have an enormous influence on how a company can be successful or in turn be burned by what otherwise could be just a little bad event. So I thought you guys did a really, really good job of that. The other thing is, what's really timely about choosing this issue to focus on the Uber, just prior to an IPO, there is not I cannot think of what would be a more profound, important moment in a company's history than when they're on the verge of an IPO. To have an event like this be sort of forefront in investors' minds as they transform from being a private startup type environment to a public, well-established company. My first experience with Uber was not in the US, it was in Europe. I traveled for work, and when I'm home, I'm saving money all the time. When I'm traveling for work, I'm doing what I need to do for work. And I gave Uber a shot. And I was pleasantly surprised by the experience. But when I think about getting in the vehicle, again, I go back to sort of my last question. How am I going to know that who Uber is in a different way than they were before? Okay. So that rider agreement piece, I'd like your answer. I also just think about, is there any other sort of signage or other type of communication that would address this issue and reassure? It's going to be different from my experience when I go to Lyft. But I thought for what I perceive to be your amount of experience and exposure on things, you guys consistently hit issues and questions in my mind as you compelled and drew me into the topic. That was excellent, really, really good. The competitive piece, the shareholder piece, the financial piece, and the ethical piece of it as well, which is a different dimension, I think, than some earlier generations would be in contrast with your generation, which is important.
I think you did a great job also. Your professionalism, the way in which you introduced yourselves, the way in which you stepped forward to answer questions, your kind of command of the room, and the way you engaged us, very professional. Your focus on the content and specifically on the ethical piece, the way in which you linked it and benchmarked it to ethical practices, very well, and to our own values, and essentially called us to that. Just a few recommendations. On your last slide where it states, could you go back to one of the last slides, right there? Why it's important, you don't make an ethical claim there. You give us business benefits for your recommendation. Number 5 is the right thing to do. If you're making an ethical argument, make the ethical argument all the way through. And a lot of times when people deal with business ethics issues, they defer to business benefit justifications, and so it becomes fundamentally a marketing issue as opposed to an ethical issue. So maintain the strength of that because you were so strong all the way through. Sometimes there was so much stuff on your slides, I was still reading something when you moved on, and your slides were really great, too much content, and so that's a little bit of an issue. Just from a governance standpoint, because you're speaking to the board, in my last role I did governance. I was executive staff to the board of directors of a multi-billion-dollar healthcare system. We had a multi-million-dollar fine on a data breach through an inadvertent process that released health records. Security and risk for data protection is an important issue for governance because boards are being held responsible for making sure that they've got and oversee effective infrastructures that protect data and protect security. And so you could have, it's part of the learning process, but you could have spoken to the board's fiduciary responsibilities and how that's such an important board responsibility of oversight. It would have strengthened your argument. You guys did really great. So anyway, just one more piece.
I'll echo the sentiment. You did very well, very professional, very articulate. Your slides did have a lot of information. I found myself doing the same thing. And I was like, oh, I just wanted to finish reading that thought, but it may have been because it needs to be a balance of how much information is there. And with the initial public offering, I think, you just to get on that discussion for governance, internal governance, certifications, your company's going to be going through a lot more of that. And we want our CEO and their executives to sign off on certifications to the street that they know they can count on. So what is the flow down internal control requirements to their leaders within the business to understand? But that gets into the transparency, how transparency, and one of the really important avenues of providing transparency is making sure you have employees who are comfortable raising those concerns. Because if you don't have employees that are willing to do that down in the weeds, you're not going to see the concerns until certs are already signed, right? Then you've got to back up and correct everything. But to the subcontractor and our suppliers, our drivers, slow down the requirements in the contract language. That should be a requirement. And as a publicly traded company, we're going to need to provide that too. So we're going to have to provide that we have those established with our suppliers and drivers. The one thing to get to this slide, when I saw this slide, I see an improved company image. To me, it is, but it's more about integrity, to improve the company integrity. Image can be everything. You can have somebody that's dressed really sharp and you've got a really nice car and the image is going to be great, but what's behind the door, right? So to me, it's about integrity and trust, and that's where you'll get loyalty. You have to happen on that. The signage, improve signage in the car, anything you can do to increase that trust and relationship with those customers. I hear that you have drivers and suppliers, but to me, that's not your primary concern. Your primary concern is really the customer and people getting in that car, they're gonna, give you a charge number, what other information is next? They only got 3 pieces of information, what else is next? So, really trying to show them who you've hired, the cyber threat, all of that, explain everything, provide that transparency to the person stepping in the car. It's all about the integrity piece. But you did a great job.
I have 2 last ones in what these folks mentioned was excellent. I couldn't agree more. So my last 3 thoughts are as follows. So first of all, I really liked the GBS Codex argument. That was outstanding. Okay, it reflects research and effort. It reflects a way to bring to bear something that otherwise, to my knowledge, is not part of the equation, sort of the Uber corporate or what's being discussed, but leverage something that has real and genuine relevance. I thought that was an excellent point. Second, and full disclosure, I'm a hypocrite with what I'm about to say, okay? Slow down. Okay? So I've been told many times, you can tell how nervous I am, because the more nervous I am, the faster I talk. So just be aware of that in yourself. Think about politicians and how effective they are as speakers, just whoever it is you may like. But it is remarkable how slow they talk. But they do so very deliberately to learn skill. It's not something you naturally come by. You have to work at it. Okay. The last thing I would say is, and I completely agree with both these folks. You guys have a lot of stuff, and all of it is good. Okay. Your challenge going forward will be, how do I cull it down to really drive home the messages I want to convey in the next rounds of the competition, assuming you move on. Okay. I thought you guys did. The fact that you worked together the way you did, the way you would look at each other, was very positive. Thanks for being here.